This meeting to order, March 20th, 2024. Probably the last meeting you'll have to put up with me as chair for a while, so I want to thank you guys for that. And with that, let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Secretary, will you call roll?
Let's find my list.
There you go.
Chairman Kaylee,
Here.
Vice Chairman Anselmi Dalton,
Here.
Secretary Craig present, Chairman Choma or Commissioner Choma,
Here.
Commissioner Glick,
Here.
Commissioner Hosey,
Here.
Commissioner Cott,
Here.
Commissioner Lawson,
Here.
Commissioner Pence,
Here.
Commissioner Suker.
Excused.
Excused. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. The Jason, I'll turn it over to you. You have a couple of quick announcements.
Yeah. So, Mr. Chairman, Commission, we have a couple of new employees we want to introduce. First one is Katie Goodell. She's our new Office of Support Specialist. She took over for Nancy Kasner, who retired this last summer, fall. And Katie comes to us from a local elementary school. So she's used to wrangling kids. So there's probably some similarities between that and this job. So, and then the other one, Sarah Barkston, she comes to us from the City of Cheyenne Board of Public Utilities. She's filling our grant administrator position, and she did quite a bit of that work for trying to find grants for the City of Cheyenne. So she's jumped right into the IRA and the RCPP discussion that Chase was working on. So she's been a great addition. So just wanted to introduce those folks, and you'll be dealing with them here in the near future.
Well, welcome, Sarah and Katie. We appreciate you. Okay, with that, do we have any discussion on election of officers and any motions? Any discussion? Motions?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if there aren't any other motions from the floor, I'd like to offer Robert Choma as our next secretary.
Any other motions?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Discussion? With that, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Welcome. How about for motions for vice chair?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to nominate Lee Craig from District 3 as vice chairman.
Any other motions? With that, we do have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Discussion? With that, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Welcome. Motions for chair.
Chairman, my privilege to bring forward and nominate Lisa Asami Dalton for the future chairman of this esteemed group. Second.
With a motion and a second, any other motions for chair? With that, we do have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Welcome,
Thank you.
Chair.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have a motion for the approval of minutes from January 10th?
Mr. Chairman, I move the minutes of January 10th be approved as written.
Second.
And we have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion on those minutes? Any discussion? With that, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, Jason, I guess you have an update for us.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll give you a quick update on the legislative session. Just a quick reminder to speak into your microphones if you have stuff to say. We have folks online that can't hear very well sometimes if we don't get close to our microphones and you don't see a red light up. So I think you guys are doing good so far. I just wanted to remind you. Okay, so couple bills. The House Bill 1, Senate File 1 is the budget bill every year in the session. And just a couple things to point out there is there was a lot of discussion about Board of Control and the fact that it comes out of account 1 to fund that through the state engineer's office to the tune of roughly $16.9 million. I should say, we or the governor's office was supportive of trying to remove that from account 1, put it back in the general fund. And that's way we went through our budget analysis with the Joint Appropriations Committee. What ended up in the budget bill was basically a one-time biennial refund. So of about $16.9 million from the state auditor's office from the general fund. So in the future, it will remain to be taken or continue to be taken out of account 1 for the Board of Control. But this next biennium will get that kind of refund replacement money of $16.9 million. And then I'm sure the next budget session, 2 years from now, we'll be having the same conversation. So that was one thing that came out of it. So did get some additional funds into our program. And then also, if you recall, the ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, there was dollars that came to the state of Wyoming. And there was some language there's numerous bills kind of floating around during the session that dealt with ARPA and unobligated, unexpended ARPA funds and what to do with those. And what survived actually was also in the budget bill. And it gives the authority to the governor to, on April 1 of this year, to go in and basically sweep any unappropriated, unobligated ARPA funds that have been previously appropriated. Because we're coming up against a deadline here at the end of 2024 to have those funds obligated. And then, of course, they don't need to be spent until the end of 2026. Again, there was a lot of discussion about this during the session. We provided information to the governor's office and the budget department about what projects we have that have ARPA funds, so they would be ARPA eligible. And then kind of an accounting of the funds that we use to match with those ARPA funds. And that equated to about $26 million worth of match funds to ARPA projects. So one of the bills that was floated around was actually looking to replace those dollars, had specific language to account 1 or 2, depending on which account those projects were associated with. So I think the intent is still there for the governor's office to work with our agency to identify those projects that we could replace those dollars that we have match associated with. And then again, that would free up potentially upwards $26 million. We're expending those dollars as we speak. Every week, every month, we get invoices in. So we're talking with the governor's office, staying in close contact to make sure we get that up and running as quickly as possible. But again, there's that April 1, and I'm not sure exactly what the balance is that they have that's unappropriated, unobligated now versus, what they're going to kind of sweep as of April 1 and then try to redistribute. So again, I think this is a positive, should get some additional dollars into the program. So really that's what came out of the budget bill that was associated with our program. Our budget passed no problem for the office and the administration of the program. So I'll move on to the planning bill. And as you remember at the January meeting, and then if you attended the January Select Water Committee meeting, the Select Water Committee included language in the planning bill that was working on language at the January Select Water Committee meeting that would clarify the authority of the Water Development Program to be able to administer any dollars that came through the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the Colorado River long-term durable efficiency type projects. And then also the RCPP, the Regional Conservation Partnership Program that our office, Chase Develli, I mentioned, applied for some of those dollars through the NRCS and was successful in getting those dollars, which more or less tie in and can be hopefully matched with some of this IRA funding that once we get more direction from the Bureau of Reclamation. So that language that clarified that administrative authority for our program was included in the planning bill during the session as an amendment. That went through no problem. And then the other thing I just wanted to point out with the planning bill, because in the January Water Development Commission meeting, you guys, in regards to the UW Water Research Program, had suggested we go forward with the one project. I believe it was nitrogen, looking at algal blooms. And at the Select Water Committee meeting, I think it was that same day or not same day, but that week, they included an additional project. So we had ended up with 2 UW Water Research projects, and that was more of looking at a center pivot and modified irrigation practices, looking at nighttime irrigation and how that would kind of work for efficiency and as well as crop yield. So went into the session with both those UW Water Research programs, and the Select Water Committee at their meeting in January, instead of bringing that out of account 1, said, let's fund that with general fund. And that passed in our planning bill. So about $397,000 in change in a planning bill for those 2 UW Water Research projects. And we'll get funds transferred into account 1 from the general fund to fund those 2 projects. So planning bill, again, came through good. And then the last one is the construction bill. And just a couple of things on that. Yeah. For the UW Water Research projects.
Yep.
It was, of course, that's not the planning bill. Does anybody have that number off the top of their head? There you go. 397,514.
Thank you, sir.
And we'll be covering that here shortly when we ask for your approval of those different contracts and agreements too. So it's on one of these summary sheets that we've handed out, this tan summary sheet here. Okay, so the construction bill, if you recall, we receive applications for small water projects in November, and then it takes quite a bit of time for Jody Pavlika, sitting in the front row here, who administers that program for our office, to go through all those, make sure they're what's eligible, what's not, and then get back to sponsors and ask questions, answer questions, and then come put together our recommendations. So we, right before session, or right about the time it started, we had a pretty good idea of the number of projects we had received applications for and the dollar amount that would take to get those completed. In January, again, I think I spoke to you guys. We had about $1.5 million in change to complete small water projects in account 1. And at the time I said, yep, we should live within our means, and, just like we're doing with the rest of our program. Once we got a better handle on the projects we had, that would have back up a step here. So when we try to prioritize small water projects, it's difficult to prioritize one small water project against another when they're in the same prioritization category. So a pipeline versus a pipeline for stock use and tanks and things like that. So what we typically have done in the past is, if we have enough money to get through all the priority 3s or all the priority 4s before we run out of money, that's where we cut it off. And then anything after that priority, we just won't fund that year. So when we looked at it this year, we could only fund priority 1s and 2s with that roughly 1.5 million that we had. And it would have left about 27 projects out of getting funded this year. So I thought that was fairly extreme. And we knew at the time that this biennial refund of about 16.9 million was probably going to come our way, because that came out of Joint Appropriations Committee. So I had talked to the Select Water Committee members, at least some of the chairman, and discussed that with her. So they brought an amendment during Senate Ag Committee during the session to include an additional $500,000 into the small water program, so we could fund further through that list of projects that we'd received applications for. So that's one change. Originally, they had proposed that it come out of the general fund, and it ended up coming out of account one, that additional 500,000. Again, I think because of that 16.9 million one-time refund. And then the other thing that was added as part of that amendment associated with small water is the project description in statute. It originally reads construction of small dams, windmills, spring development, pipelines, etc., to impound, develop, and convey water for livestock, wildlife, irrigation, environmental, and recreational purposes. And there was an addition made to that project description to include guzzlers and other water collection, storage, and drinking systems. So fairly benign addition, because talking with Jody, we were already funding guzzlers. So again, it was just really a clarification to the program description and project description within that program. Then the removal of the sunset dates for both account one and account two small water programs were repealed. So that's good. That's basically what you guys had going in to the session. The other thing with the construction bill, if you recall, there was a handful of projects where we recommended funding for pre-construction back in November, and the Select Water Committee chose to fund construction through a general fund transfer, either into account one or account two. And that was to the tune of about, I want to say $5 to $6 million. That's actually 8.9, almost $9 million, that general fund. And again, I think because of that one-time refund, the way it came out in the end was those funds would come from account one or account two rather than from general fund. Okay. And then the last thing in the construction bill is a little difficult to understand. Actually, I shouldn't say it's the last thing. One more thing before I get to that. So cloud seeding, and this is the aerial cloud seeding program in the Medbo Sierra Madres. I mentioned in kind of my middle of the legislative session update that had been removed at the Senate Ag Committee, if I recall correctly. On third reading on the House side, cloud seeding, or that particular aerial program, was added back into the construction bill and passed, and then went to conference committee, because every time a bill comes out of one house and goes to the other and it comes back, if they don't match, they have to go to a conference committee to agree if they don't agree on the floor on the changes. So when it went back to the Senate, they agreed, yes, we'll go ahead and fund that aerial cloud seeding program. So that was an update from what you saw kind of midterm at the session. And then, okay, now the last thing is, and this came from House Appropriations, if I remember right. A project was included called the Redundancy of Water Delivery Systems, with Water Development Commission as a sponsor, statewide rural domestic water supply. The project description was adding a redundancy of domestic water delivery systems statewide. And the total project budget is $6 million. And the appropriation reads, there is appropriated from Water Development's account 1, 2, and 3 from monies previously obligated for projects that may be recaptured with current unobligated ARPA funds to the commission, or as much thereof as is necessary. So for this purpose. So more or less, say the first $6 million that we can recapture if the governor's office chooses to try to replace some of our matching funds in these ARPA projects, would be available for redundancy projects throughout the state. Now, we typically don't fund redundancy because we don't have enough money to fund what we need to fund just to upgrade or build new. So I think more to come on that probably in May. I've been having some discussions with the governor's office. There was a project in the western part of the state that sent an email associated with this very close to when it was passed, that had to do with a backup generator for their water systems. So I know there's some interest out there, and we'll just have to see kind of how it shakes out. I should mention neither bill or the budget bill, to my knowledge, have been signed into law yet. I think if they're not signed by the governor by the end of the week, then they go into law just automatically. So not concerned about it. But when we get to approval of contracts and agreements, it'll need to be contingent upon the both bills going into law. So anyway, more to come on the redundancy of water delivery systems and once we get a better understanding of what that might look like. But I would anticipate if it moves forward across the governor's desk that we would accept applications September 1, just like we always do. And we'll kind of have to think about what we do in between now and then to get the word out. So that's what I have for an update on the legislative session. Any questions?
I got a couple of just quick questions. Well, no, it was. I got a couple of questions for you. On when you started out with the Bureau of Control giving us that one-time refund back, can you give us the dates when they started that? I think it's really important because I think there's only one guy on this board that was around back then. So I think it's good to know when and why that should come back to us forever and not just a one-time year.
Yeah. So, Mr. Chairman, I believe in the early 90s, 92 to about 2002, the Board of Control started coming out of account 1 instead of the general fund. Up to that time, as far as our records show, it always came out of general fund back to when it was, part of the Constitution that you needed a Board of Control to regulate water within Wyoming. I don't have all the details back in history, and then again in about 1997 or 2017 to current, they did it again. And it's really been associated with when revenues have been short and they don't, the legislature just doesn't have enough funding to go around for the budget. Then they use that as kind of an austerity measure to balance the budget. So I think they recognize the importance of water. There was a lot of discussion about that. They just thought it was easier I think they thought it was easier to just do it every 2 years instead of making it permanent. And I'm sure there's arguments on the other side that it would have been just as easy to do it the opposite way and kind of make it more permanent. But over time, and we provided this information to different committees, there's been about $100 million, a little over, that has been used for Board of Control out of account 1 during those timeframes. So.
And without that, we would have lost, 25 projects you said that we wouldn't have been able to fund this year?
Well, yeah, that's more associated with the small water project program. So without the additional $500,000 that was added through the Senate Ag Committee, we wouldn't have been able to fund about 27 projects. So we would have only been able to fund the priority 1s and 2s in the account 1 small water. Now we're able to fund them all, or all the ones that were eligible to be funded.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for the director? Commissioner?
Okay, it's on. Jason, but they took that money and that was for the Board of Control. And then they just put it back in our account. Is it a refund, or is that how that works, or what?
Mr. Chairman, it's more or less a refund. There's still funding that comes out of our account, and they're basically then more or less putting it back in from a different source. So for the next 2 years, the biennium, we will not be paying for the Board of Control. More or less, the general fund will be.
Okay.
But 2 years from now, when we have another budget session, we'll go into that session with expecting 16.9 or probably more, just because of inflation and other things that go up, rent and different things like that. That administrative budget for the Board of Control will be shown coming out of account 1. And I'm sure we'll have this whole discussion again 2 years from now in the legislative session. I don't know that for sure, but I don't know if that answers your question.
I was just asking because the reason I was asking is, like, from the time they took that money to now, the interest would have been quite significant. That's what I was asking about. And I know they don't do that, but I was just, if you looked at it, we would have quite a bit more funds, or we could have paid for projects that would have been cheaper back then. Significantly cheaper. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions for the director? Okay, with that, let's move on.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, the next agenda item is new level 1 and 2 project applications, and we'll have Barry Lawrence, our Deputy Director of Planning, talk about that.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair, congratulations. And members of the commission, pleased to be here to talk to you a little bit about the applications that we received. It's that time of year when I do that in March. If you remember, we have a 13-month process where we are wrapping up the process from the last go around, the contracts that you're going to be approving here in a little bit. That's the end of the old process and we're starting the new process. So it's a 13-month process. We have the month of March is where we have the overlap. So we'll be talking about that, and I'll be going through the schedule a little bit with you, which is in your notebook in tab B. And then also I want to talk to you about the applications that we received. So I think the deadline for applications was March 1st every year for level 1 and 2 planning studies. We received 9 applications, and you might wonder, how does that compare to previous years? Last year, we actually received 22 applications. The year before that, 17, and the year before that, 7. So we were on an uphill, gain there for a while, but then this last year, for whatever reason, we only received 9 applications. So it's a 60% decrease this year in the number of planning applications. You'll see on your list that we've assigned project managers to each of the projects. Those were assigned a week or so ago. And our project managers are busy setting up site visits, of which you will be invited and so forth if they haven't already been held. And they'll be, based on those site visits and so forth, writing up recommendations. And then what we've done is tentatively or preliminarily assign commissioners to each of these projects. You'll see them listed in blue there, the assignments that we're proposing. Basically, to just refresh everybody's memory, that this is basically you're shadowing the project from cradle to grave, from the very start, from the infancy, when we're doing, proposals and site visits and consultant selection, all the way to when we get the project off and running. We do scoping meetings, and then on the backside, obviously, the final presentation or the draft presentation to the sponsor. So that's from cradle to grave. So we're asking you to shadow these projects, and you'll be plugged in along the way by our project managers. Relative to the assignments, we tried to make the assignments relative to water divisions, but obviously it's not always possible. If you look real quick, I know you guys were talking about, for instance, Commissioner Pence and so forth and Cott, we only had one Water Division 4 project that came in application. So obviously we have to kind of spread the wealth here, whereas we had 4 projects coming in from Water Division 1, 4 projects from Water Division 1, 2 projects from Water Division 2, 2 projects from Water Division 3, and only 1 project from Water Division 4 came in, 1 application. So it gives us 9 projects, as I mentioned. We will need 2 commissioners on each of those. So that's 18 commissioner slots. And given 10 commissioners, that means 8 of you will have 2 projects to shadow, and 2 of you will only have 1 project to shadow based on the assignments here. And the 2 folks that only have 1, it's Commissioners Glick and Lawson. You're either the winners or the losers, depending on how you feel about that. Those are the 2 folks that only have 1 that has been assigned. So if we look at the 9 projects, briefly, you'll see, and kind of I'll walk down through the list a little bit here. We had 2 level 1 new development projects, water master plans. We have 2 level 2 new development feasibility studies to include a well siting study and a storage tank study. Then in the ag side and the rehab side, level 1 projects, we had 4 projects, and those are all irrigation district master plans. A couple of them are updates from existing plans that are 20, 30 years old. And then the last one there is a dam and reservoir project application having to do with Worthen Meadows and Fry Lake, looking at possible storage capacity enhancement and other issues. So the 9 projects, just to refresh everybody's memory, in May, we will walk through these in more detail. Remember, we haven't done site visits or anything yet. So what we have is just the applications. You will be provided those applications here shortly, usually around April 1. We send those out to you. So you see those applications, what came in the door, the actual raw applications. We'll send those out to you. These site visits are being set up. You will be invited to site visits if they've not been held yet, and most of them have not been held. I think there's only been 1 or 2 that have been held just from a timing issue. But you'll get to, for those of you who want to, and again, it's optional if you want to go out and learn about the project with our project manager and so forth and the sponsor. It's a great time to do that. I should also tell you that, remember, after those site visits are held, the project managers come back to the office, they write up the recommendations and so forth. It's reviewed by the senior staff here and the director, obviously. And titles and descriptions and even levels of projects may change. Just because somebody has asked for a level 2, that doesn't necessarily mean that's what makes the most sense. And so that'll be up to the discretion of the office to come up with what makes the most sense of those, and those recommendations were written up that way. And so in the May meeting, we'll walk through those in more detail, all 9, and we'll have if you remember, we have the sponsors at our May meeting. It's joint with Select Water, and we'll hear from the sponsors what their issues are and concerns and so forth, and why they're asking for the studies. And so what we will be asking for at the May meeting would then be commission approval to begin consultant selection, preliminary approval to begin selection on those projects. At this time, what I would need is for you to look at those lists, the list there, and what we've preliminarily assigned, and let us know if there's any conflicts. Need to know if there's any conflicts at this point in time that we should be aware of, that we need to do a switch of commissioners or so forth. Or if conversely, I know last year we had a commissioner that was had an intimate knowledge of a situation, of a project, and so they asked to be on that project. We made that happen. So certainly if there's that type of situation out there, that one that you really want to be on because, and you don't feel you were assigned, but you should be because you know so much about it or whatever, have a personal interest, then certainly get with me afterwards. But we really need to know those today before you leave. If you can let us know if those are going to work, or if you need a change, let us know that, because here again, we're going to get the list to our project manager so they can invite you to those site visits. Some of them are starting. I think we've had 1 or 2 already, but there's a bunch more to come. So we want to get you included in that. So that's the application list. I just want to remind you the process after May, when we talked about these and say we get preliminary approval to begin. Then that's when we solicit interest on the projects. We ask for statements of interest, statements of qualification from consultants, send out to our list. There's 4 ways we get the word out. We put it on our HC website. We also have what we call Gov Delivery. It blasts out to all the consultants, and I think there's 200 or 300 on that. We also put it on the state construction website, the procurement folks on the state side. And then also we run successive ads 4 separate weeks in the Casper Star Tribune. So we really feel we pretty well blanket and get the word out. And most of the consultants know to look for that in the May timeline. So we'd be asking for statements of interest, statements of qualification during the month of May into June. And then by the end of June, we'll do shortlisting. If you remember, we try to get to 5 firms if possible. It's not always possible to get 5 firms. And that's when we're looking at qualifications and so forth, previous experience, what type of team did they assemble and so forth. And certainly we do look at residency concerns. We're required to look at residency in state firms and give them preferential treatment. RFPs then go out to those shortlisted firms in July on all those projects. And at that time we will hold another site visit. We'll do pre-proposal tours for the consultants in the hunt. And then those consultants have about a month to put together their proposals and get those to us. They actually come in, they're going to be due this year, August 1st. The proposals have to be in our office. And that's right before the commission meeting, which makes it nice that next week when we have the commission meeting, and I might mention the commission meeting's been moved up a week this year, so it doesn't interfere with state fair and so forth. It's a week earlier, but you'll have those proposals. We can distribute them at the meeting. Also at that time, we will send out the proposals to those on the selection team to include the sponsor and so forth. If you remember, selection teams are made up of 5 individuals. So it's not only 2 commissioners that have been assigned. We have the project manager on our side, obviously. We have a sponsor rep, obviously somebody representing the sponsor, and then an advisor. An advisor typically would be somebody in our construction division, but it depends on the nature of the project. It could also be somebody from state engineer's office, game and fish and so forth, if there's fish passage issues, that type of thing. And so, and even our water resource data system participates as they're able. This is the fun part. The proposals go out, and over the years we've tried to lengthen the time you have. It's kind of a balancing act, because if you give people too much time, they still wait till the last week. I hate to say it, but if you have a deadline, so we give them 1 month. You have 1 month to review those proposals, and this year, the most that anybody would have would be 2 sets of proposals, 5 most, but I'm doubting we'll get that many. We'll see. It would be great if we did. And then you'd have to have your rankings in, and that's where Megan comes in, and she hunts you down if you haven't turned in your rankings, because obviously those rankings feed into the interviews. We hold the interviews. Top 3 firms will get the interviews, and those interviews are also a week earlier. So we've moved it out of beet harvest. We've moved it out of hunting season. We are now last week of September. So it's interviews, and because we only have 9, that we can do them all in one day. So it'll be Wednesday, September 25th, the day prior to the commission meeting on the 26th. Okay, so Wednesday, Thursday of that week. So it'll be a much shorter period. We don't have as many. And out of that consultant selection process, obviously, we will hope to have a consultant selected and a dollar amount for that project. And then those were plugged into the omnibus planning and construction bills and go through the legislature. And which this year I should mention will be a December commission meeting because we've got a long session coming up in 2025. I can't believe I'm saying 2025, but 2025 already. And it's a long session, January, February. So we'll have to have a December commission meeting to finalize the omnibus bills. And at that, here again, 1 year from now, much like we are today, we would be approving these theoretically, if everything went okay and according to Hoyle and went through it, we'd be approving 1 year from now, these projects, the 9 that you see with contracts. That gives you an idea and the overlap that we're dealing with. With that, I think I'd stand for any questions.
Any questions for Barry? Commissioners? Well, thanks, Barry. Great report.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it.
I just want to point out that it avoids hunting season for some, but people that like archery, it does not. So thank you, Barry.
I'd like to thank Barry for the work he's done moving meetings around for harvest and for state fair. I'm sure there may be people who aren't happy with it, but I am.
Thank you.
All right. Next agenda item is agenda item number 8, planning project amendments. I would ask if the commission, once I go through these here real quick, we've got 3 of them. If you want to just handle them as a block, or if you'd prefer to do each one individually, we can do that too.
I think a block would be great.
Okay. All right. The first one is the Alkali Creek Reservoir Final Design Amendment number 3 with Tri-Hydro Corporation. And this Alkali Creek's the one we've talked about here and there over the last year or so. There's been different landowner turnover, new landowners coming into that area where we're looking for easements. I should say where the Millwood Watershed Improvement District is looking for easements for modification of their ditch and this and that. So it's taken more time and additional design work. We're trying to look at, can we change the Anita ditch and put it into a pipe? That seems to be something that a lot of these landowners that have some heartburn over the project would like to see. That's going to increase the cost of the project quite a bit. Design work. Tri-Hydro has been looking at other funding sources to help us complete that as far as construction dollars. And really, Tri-Hydro has been under contract since 2017 on the design of this, and it's languished, I'll admit, for these reasons. And if you remember several years ago with the additional geotechnical drilling we did during final design, found some different conditions that we had seen in the level 2 feasibility studies, which led to additional design work. So what this amendment does would be to replace their original hourly rate schedule from 2017, allow them to update those hourly rates because they've seen wage inflation from trying to hire engineers, just like we've seen inflation through the construction industry as well. And then extending the expiration date of the contract by a year to December 31st of 2025. With that, I'd ask if there's any questions on that particular amendment.
Commissioner? Chairman, I should say.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, I was just curious, when you look at it, I understand there's been inflation and this contract's been going on for a long time, but it looked like they were saying that the contract was still going to stay around 2.8 million. So where is the change coming? Is the contract going to exceed the 2.8 million, or where are we landing with this one?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Assembly Dalton, I would anticipate we're going to come back next year for additional funding on this. We're trying to understand, again, with Tri-Hydro's work on the design, really, is this pipeline feasible and how much would it cost? What other funding sources, all that stuff. And then at some point here, hopefully in the near future, I don't know if that will be the May meeting or say the August meeting, we'll bring that information back to the commission and the Select Water Committee to really get a good understanding of, what the additional costs would be. Is that a direction we want to go with the project? And of course, that'll be outside their scope of work for design from the original scope. So I would anticipate, not even knowing the answer to that yet, that we'll probably be looking for additional funds to complete the design of that particular reservoir project.
Clinton, do you have a question? Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to have my memory refreshed. I'll make sure I'm thinking of the right project. This is the project that has the some issues with easements. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that's right. The one east of Anderson, just west of Hyattville, 8,000 acre feet reservoir, new reservoir. And yeah, we would fill the reservoir out of an existing ditch off of Meadowlark, or not Meadowlark, sorry, Medicine Lodge Creek. And to get both the irrigation water through as well as the water to actually fill the reservoir, there's some overlap potentially near the end of filling the reservoir and the startup of irrigation where we'd have to enlarge that ditch.
The proposals on the pipeline, would it, excuse me, would it be the entire distance of the supply canal or just portions of it?
A good majority of it. It's, I want to say 4 to 5 miles of pipeline, and it's very flat grade. So it will need to be fairly large pipe to actually get the amount of water through it that we need.
So that could be a substantial increase in cost.
Yeah, tens of millions of dollars. Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, moving on.
Okay, the next amendment is just effectuating what we've talked about previously in the November meeting, and this is for the Pavilion groundwater supply level 2 study, where we are looking to drill a new well for the town of Pavilion. And last July, when they took bids from drillers, the bids came in higher than what was originally anticipated and what was originally appropriated for the study. So we took through the session, brought to you back in November, the recommendation to add about $429,000 to that appropriation so they could go back out to bid and make sure we weren't going to come in, I guess, or bids wouldn't come in higher than the appropriation we had again. So we overestimated on what additional funds we would need, talking with the engineer. And so this particular amendment would be for a 1-year time extension and adding $428,238 to their existing contract, which would take that overall contract dollar amount to $1,115,080. And again, this one was in the omnibus bill, and it's really just effectuating that, putting that additional money in there. Any questions on that one? Okay, and then the last one is the Riverton Regional Water Master Plan. W.H. Smith and Associates, they're doing a good job. This is just more of a complicated, a lot of information gathering for this particular master plan. So just looking for a little additional time to be able to finish it up. So it's just a time extension going from June 30th of this year to the end of 2024. So about 6 months. So again, just a time extension. So if there are any questions on that, I would just ask for your favorable consideration of those 3 amendments. And I should have mentioned before I started talking here. So I'm starting into this peach colored sheet, summary sheet, because those amendments are the first thing on that summary sheet.
Commissioners, any questions or do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the 3 amendments as presented: Alkali Creek Reservoir, Pavilion Groundwater Supply, and Riverton Regional Water Master Plan amendments.
Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Commissioner.
do we need to have it clarified that it's contingent upon the approval from the legislature? I don't know what that
Yeah.
wording is, but
Mr.
we need to
Chairman.
add that, right?
Yeah, that is a good point, because the one Pavilion groundwater supply is contingent upon that, because it does include an appropriation. So I would just say contingent upon the omnibus water bill planning becoming law.
Commissioner Cobb.
I accept that friendly amendment.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? With that, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Motion carries.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, the next agenda item is agenda item number 9. And this is the level 1 and 2 planning project contracts from the 2024 omnibus water bill. So again, your motion would need to include that similar language contingent upon the omnibus water bill becoming law. But again, referring to the peach colored summary sheet, you'll see that next heading on that block of projects. And again, these are the ones that, as Barry mentioned, we were looking at these a year ago and we went through our consultant selection. In May, we discussed them. In November, we discussed them, so on and so forth, January throughout the legislative session. So now we are just going under contract and signing those contracts, approving those contracts. The other thing I should mention that I failed to mention, it's becoming a habit this morning of mine, is we had a meeting January 7th with the Select Water Committee to review and recommend all these projects that you're looking at today. And they gave their favorable recommendation to everything you're looking at today. They tend to try to meet before they all break up at the end of the session. So again, that was the day before the session ended. They called a meeting real quick that Thursday morning, and we went down to the Capitol and ran through all this with them as well. So just a heads up on that. But so the first block of projects are our new development level 1 projects. So account 1, level 1. And we've got our 9 projects there. I think 8 of them are master plans. And then we've got the one Salt River watershed study. You see the consultants that the contract is with, that you guys had interviews with, and then the dollar amounts for each one of those particular contracts. That second group of projects is our level 2 account 1 or new development projects, Cody area evaluations, Grable, and Hot Springs. And same thing there. You can see the consultants that were successful in the interviews and the total contract amounts for each. And then the last one is our account 2 rehabilitation level 1 studies. We've got 5 of those, and you see the different dollar amounts there. So if you have any particular questions about any one project, I can sure do my best to answer it. But again, we've talked about these quite a bit. So I'd ask for your favorable consideration and approval of each one of those planning study contracts.
Do we have any questions on the planning study contracts? Commissioners, any? Okay, with that, do we have a motion?
Sorry. This darn thing anyway, I'm always doing that. I'd like to make a motion that we approve all of the level 1 and level 2 planning project contracts
Contingent upon.
the
Omnibus?
omnibus bill being put into law.
Thank you.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? With that, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. The next group of projects, we call this agenda item 10, but again, working off that summary sheet are just the University of Wyoming MOUs. And again, we've discussed these. They were in the planning bill. The first one is with the Office of Water Programs, which is Greg Kerr and his administration of the program and the biennial budget for that in the amount of $175,000. And then the second one there that you see is for the actual water research projects. And we've got the 2 that I mentioned for the total dollar amount of $397,514. If you were having any questions or wanted to look at the actual contracts, that far left column is the page in the e-notebook where you can find each one of these 2. So again, with that, I would ask if there are any questions on those university MOUs, and if not, for your favorable approval.
Okay, commissioners, any questions on the UW projects? Commissioner Cott?
I'm ready to make a motion.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the University of Wyoming projects as presented, MOUs and projects as presented.
We have a second?
Contingent upon the omnibus water projects becoming law.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Discussion? With that, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, next agenda item is agenda item number 11. I'm going to have Jody Pavlika come up. This is our small water projects program. And these are projects you haven't seen before. So we're going to spend a little time going through them. I'd refer you to the handouts that look somewhat like this. We've got one for account 1, small water projects, and then also one for account 2. I would mention there was some discussion about the small water program during the legislative session, and in particular, equitable distribution of projects throughout the state. And when we spoke to the Select Water Committee about this, I think they all agreed that this was a topic that they wanted to hear a little bit more about at our August meeting, just to make sure there doesn't need to be any criteria changes or anything like that, just so everybody understood what the program was, kind of what our guidance documents look like, our prioritization of projects and different things like that. So I'd anticipate we will bring some additional information to you in August. And then I would point out before I hand it over to Jody is, again, on this summary sheet, you will see that we have the available and very bottom on the first page. For account 1, you see the available funding, $2,084,375,000. And then the recommended project total would be that far right column. And we've got that for both accounts 1 and 2. So you can see the funding available versus the recommended projects that we're asking for funding on. So with that, I will hand it over to Jody.
Thank you. And the way we typically do this is if you'll take a look at the table, I think it's the first in that section. On the far right-hand column, there is a column that's titled Sponsor Summary. So what I will do, I'll start in account 1, and then I'll summarize the project requests by district. And then many of our sponsors, as you can see, are either in the room today, and there's quite a few more online. So as I get to the end of a sponsor's summary, I will ask them if they have anything that they would like to add, and then you can ask questions if you have them. So.
And I'll sit back there just so they can come up.
Okay.
Okay.
Jody, could you give me a page number that what we're starting on here?
I don't have the e-notebook, so maybe Megan can.
594.
603 is account 1, where we're starting.
Six.
That same summary sheet. And the map, if you want to reference it, is 602.
Okay. Thank you, Megan.
Okay, we all ready?
We're ready.
All right. So beginning today, we have one project in account 1 from the Campbell County Conservation District with a requested grant of $30,500. And I believe Cheyenne Love is on virtually today if you have any questions.
Yeah, hi everyone. This is Cheyenne Love with Campbell County Conservation District Manager. I hope you can hear me. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer anything.
Commission, any questions? Well, thank you for attending. We appreciate that.
Okay. Next up.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me attend, and thanks for your consideration of the project. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Next on the account 1 summary sheet is Hot Springs County Conservation District. They have 6 projects for a total of $210,000 worth of grant requests today. And I believe Kathy Sorensen was also attending virtually today if you have questions.
Welcome, Kathy. Are you there?
Appreciate it.
Also from Hot Springs County,
Thank you very much. Next on the account 1 summary sheet is Hot Springs County Conservation District. They have 6 projects. Kathy, could you mute your stream from your computer? I think we're getting redundancy here.
Kathy, are you out there?
Yes, we are here. Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Kathy. Do we have any questions for Kathy? Any questions, commissioners? Well, Kathy, thanks for attending. We appreciate it.
Okay, next on the list is the Laramie County Conservation District. They have 6 Account 1 projects this year for a requested total grant amount of $193,880. And they are here in the room today. Jeff Geyer and Rex Lockman.
Welcome.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Thanks. Commissioner Kaylee, the commission. I think we have several good projects here. If you have any questions, fire away.
Any questions, commissioners? Yeah, they're kind of quiet today, aren't they?
Yeah.
Well, thanks for attending. We appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Jody.
Okay, that brings us next in the list to the Lincoln Conservation District. They have requested 2 projects from Account 1 this year for a total project requested grant of $70,000. And I don't know, Lincoln has not attended virtually, and I don't know that I've seen Demont in the room. So I think Lincoln's not here today. But if you have questions, I can do my best.
Any questions for Jody on Lincoln?
Mr. Chairman, just a
Commissioner.
brief question. I see that this is an environmental type of project, and just briefly just explain. I think that's the only environmental I see on the page. So just
Yeah. These 2 projects are kind of similar. I think they have different landowners. It's my understanding, I haven't had a chance to go out and tour the projects, but it's my understanding that the river is sort of eating away at the local park. So there's erosion happening in the stream channel that's sort of eating away at their city park. And so they are requesting some funding to put in some stream channel protection and structures to reduce, point the stream channel back away from the city park so that they can correct that erosion problem that's happening. And I believe there's an irrigation ditch as involved as well. So if the erosion continues, not only will it continue to eat away at the city park, it will continue to eat away at the irrigation ditch, and the ditch might be lost to the river. So that's my sort of vague understanding.
thank you.
Chairman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just when we get to the environmental, as we're talking about, they're level 5s. And the question is, I know that we were talking about only going down to level 3 priorities with the funding. So how do we look at this, or do we have enough funding because of the ARPA funds and other things that we've had added?
They Select Water and the legislature were generous to us this year, and they added enough money to allow us to fund all of the projects.
That's right.
Great. Jody, do you know if that erosion that's been happening up there, I want to say that's been a couple of years out, right? So they've been trying to get this under control for a while.
I think that's the case. And as you can tell by the total project cost, which is like the 4th column from the end, these environmental projects tend to be bigger project costs. And so typically it takes them a while to get the other funding sources put together, whether they work with, NRCS or Trout Unlimited or whoever. They have to sort of bundle funding sources together to get these projects taken care of, because they tend to be a larger cost. So that could be why it's taken them a while to get it through the door.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so that brings us to the next on the list. For the Little Snake River Conservation District has requested 31 Account 1 projects this year for a total requested grant amount of $965,500. And Don Arnell is ready to answer any questions.
Welcome.
Commissioner, or Chairman and Commission. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer any questions. My board has made this a priority in our district, and our producers are extremely grateful that you guys have this program. So I'd like to thank you all for that. I'd also like to take just a second and thank the staff. Jody and I've worked together for like 10 years now, have done a lot of work together. So I'm grateful for the program and the staff as well.
Thank you. Any questions for Donna? Commissioner?
I see on this, you go halfway down, it says wetland development. Is that like a mitigation? Is that what that's for? I mean, get it mitigation cost?
The wetland development, let me look real quick.
Is that mitigation cost to move the wetland somewhere else or what?
Happened to.
15.
Thank you. That's the Oxbow project.
Yeah, so it's a development. Sorry. Yeah, it's a development of an Oxbow project. So, yeah, it would fall under mitigation too.
So the way these projects typically work, for those people who are not familiar with them, the river tends to cut a big oxbow, which then eats away at the banks. And so what they do is they dam up both sides of the oxbow and then essentially works to rerouting the river, right? So then they straighten out the channel, dam up the oxbow, and then so it becomes essentially a wetland sort of de facto. But what it's really doing is it's reducing the erosion and the head cutting on the bank that's adding sediment contribution to the river. So it says wetland development because essentially by damming up the river, they are creating a wetland, but it serves to reduce sediment loading to the channel and fix a lot of those other sort of stream channel issues.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions, Commissioner?
Just one question for Jody, and this is kind of restating what you've restated in the past, but you know, we see things like well and pipelines and conveyance structures. We think maybe those are just private projects, but small water development requires public benefit too. We don't have to go through all of that, but just touch on that just a little bit.
Thank you. My microphone got tired of me. That's a good reminder, and it's really good to talk about that. So I'm glad you brought the question up. Our program is functional based on the concept that there is a public benefit associated with the dollars that we're putting into each one of these projects. And so that is a constitutional provision that allows this small water program to work. So these projects, and the sponsors are very attentive to this, and specifically they call me and they don't even let an application come through the door unless they're confident and we're confident that it meets those public benefit requirements. And so inherently these project types all have benefit associated with, you know, by getting cattle off the riparian and onto the uplands, then the wetlands come back and then the water slows down. And then we've got stories here in Laramie County of projects that were put in an upland watering source, which was on an ephemeral drainage that became a year-round live stream after the riparian communities came back. So it does an amazing amount of good for the state, you know, one little small project at a time. So thank you. Did that take care of it?
Thank you.
Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Jody, thanks for that explanation. I just have one question for you. Which ones have you said to these people that come to you, said, no, that's just not going to cut it because it just doesn't have enough public benefit? Are we excluding some and not taking them all?
Yes, thank you. That does happen every year. And the question came up again this morning. Most specifically, that question comes up with the irrigation projects because center pivots are going in around the state. And so we have to cut a very fine line when it comes to irrigation applications to make sure that we are funding, like we can fund a ditch to pipe because that reduces seepage into the ditch banks and stuff like that. So we can fund ditch to pipe. The benefits of that are public benefits of that are pretty clear. But once it gets from the ditch, which has multiple users on it, to the field where it has one user on it, then the public benefit is no longer as apparent. So that's one of the more common ones that we turn down. But I've also gotten calls regarding some of the stream channel stuff because the districts are not necessarily comfortable with the fact that this represents a public benefit that they think it should, or that it's, you know, a project that's likely to last as long as they think it should. So a lot of that project vetting happens on the local level, and the districts are very good at talking to the landowners and working with their boards to make sure that it meets those requirements before it ever gets to my desk.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner?
I would like to propose maybe during one of the workshops that we have a little session with Jody and the director. We don't have to have everyone, but the commissioners in particular, and discuss the small water program a little bit. I've had more questions and comments from the public about this than any other program dealing with irrigation versus the livestock water development. Your explanation here is fine. I think a little more clarification for us so that we can communicate with the public would be good. I'd like to just spend a half an hour, and not a lot of time, but I think it's important that we be able to explain, as you've been explained, even the benefits to the riparian live stream versus seasonal type of streams, things that don't necessarily occur by putting in a sprinkler system. Because there's no one can argue that there are benefits to a center pivot versus flood irrigation. I could go down through a litany of things that happen other than water conservation when you put in a center pivot versus flood irrigation, but it's also very costly. So I think there are multiple things, but I think the commissioners as a group need to have that information as a tool for conversation with the public.
Thank you. I think that's a very good idea. I would add that in August, I think the request from the Select Water was that we have this Small Water 101 presentation at the August meeting. So I regularly travel around the state doing that presentation, and I'm certainly happy to do it in August as well. The questions that you're getting from the public are very good questions, and those are not necessarily short, easy, black and white answers. And I am happy to talk with anybody at any time about my philosophy on center pivots versus flood irrigation and the irrigation stuff that we do. But if the question gets too deep for you, please do not be ashamed to tell them to just call me, because like I tell everybody regularly, it's not as black and white as we would like it to be. And my personal opinion is center pivots are very good at what they do, but I believe flood irrigation is the reason we have streams in Wyoming in the fall. That's just my personal belief. So, you know, when it comes right down to it, we have to fall back on that public benefit requirement, and we have to make sure that we're tying our projects to that constitutional requirement. So please don't be afraid to have anyone call me. I am more than happy to spend as much time on the phone talking to whoever I need to make sure those understandings are clear.
Follow up.
Yeah, and I'm not just referring to center pivots. I personally would like to replace a whole bunch of cement ditches with gated pipe.
I agree.
I have a question for you, Jody, about the, you know, and I know it doesn't have nothing to do with what we're doing right now, but it's just a quick question. Do you think that, or do you think it's, might come back later that center pivots are having a, less of a consumptive use than flooding? And would that get us in trouble later on?
I have had many conversations with the NRCS agent in the Cody office on this exact point. And so there's two philosophies on this, and they're both equally valid. So it sort of depends on what you like to see and how that works through the system. But the agent out of the Cody office takes a very understandable approach, and it's very appropriate for his district, that center pivots do reduce the amount of water that's going on the field. And because of that, it reduces chemigation, it reduces fermigation, and it reduces seepage loss of sediment and salts out the bottom of the field. That's a very appropriate and very understandable benefit associated with center pivots. And of course, they have the salinity control program, and all of that is absolutely true. But if you take a look at most of the irrigation across the state of Wyoming, most irrigators in the state of Wyoming are irrigating alfalfa, and they're not necessarily fertilizing it, and they're not putting on a lot of chemicals. And so what they're doing is they're loading up the soil moisture profile and, you know, keeping the ditches and the ditch banks full of water so that can then return to the stream later in the fall. So I guess I would caution anybody to think that there is a blanket approach that can be applied. It almost has to be regionally looked at and considered on a how are we using the water and how does it look for this district versus that district? Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you, Jody.
Any other questions? Small water program. Donna, thank you for attending. We appreciate it.
Okay, that takes us to the next in the list. Under account 1 is the Medicine Bow Conservation District. They have 2 account 1 projects this year for a total requested grant of $64,000. And I believe Kristen Tilley is here from the district if you have any questions.
Welcome. Questions, commissioners? Well, you got off easy.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, that takes us to the next district in the list, which is the Meeteetse Conservation District. They have 2 projects out of account 1 for a total of $57,000. And I believe Stefan Cornell from the district is virtual. And I think Laura Burkhart from the Game and Fish, who helped prepare these applications, is also virtual if you have any questions.
Welcome. Lori, you out there?
Yes, this is Laura. Stefan emailed he was having problems joining, so thank you for having us. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them on behalf of Stefan.
Any questions for Laura or Jody?
Chairman,
Commissioner Glick?
I have a question. What does this mean when it says not identified in a WS study?
Yes, thank you. That's a good question. That basically just means that it was not a project that was specifically identified in a watershed study.
Oh, okay. All right. So it's in addition to, okay, thanks, Jody.
Any other questions, commissioners? Well, thank you, Laura. Thanks for attending. We appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
And that takes us to the next district on the list, which is the Niobrara Conservation District. They have requested 1 account 1 project this year for a total of $27,000. And I believe Heidi is here if you have any questions.
Welcome, Heidi. How you doing?
Good, thank you.
We have any questions for Heidi or Jody? Commissioner Glick?
Chairman, I have a question. What is it? What does it talk about when it says spring? When it says not identified in the watershed study, but then it's $29,000 for spring.
What project are you?
I was gonna say, this isn't a spring. The one, are we on a different one?
Oh, okay. Sorry. It's okay.
It's okay.
I was looking at the wrong one.
You have a lot.
Yeah.
There's information on the back of that page if you guys got lost. Any other questions? Thank you. Thanks for attending.
Okay. I want to thank you guys for having this program. This is a really important program for putting some of these projects on the ground. So we appreciate it.
We appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, and the question regarding the spring, typically what those look like, if there is a natural spring on your property and you want to take that, put in a spring collection, see my microphone, it gets tired of me. And you want to put in a spring collection system, what that typically looks like is they'll do a perforated pipe with like a sock over it, like a French drain style, and they'll collect the water in that and run it to a 36-inch culvert into the ground that will allow that to fill up, and then they will run that into a pipeline and down to a stock tank. So typically that's what those look like, is developing that spring such that they can gather the water and put it in a stock tank, and they'll put float switches on them so that they can control the water, maybe a solar pump if they need to. But that's typically what one of the spring developments will look like.
Chairman Fall, I've never seen that, and I'd like to get more information from you. I'll talk to you later, Jody.
Absolutely, no problem. Okay, so that takes us to the North Platte Valley Conservation District. They have 1 account 1 project this year for a total requested grant of $35,000. And I believe Jamie was going to be attending virtually today.
Hello, Jamie, are you up there? Jamie?
I am here. I apologize.
Not a problem. Thank you for attending. Any questions for Jamie or Jody? Commissioners? Well, we appreciate you calling in.
I am here. I apologize. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I apologize. There was some overlap there. Members of the commission, thank you for having me and for your consideration. I am happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions? It looks like we're good. Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you.
Jody?
Okay, that takes us to the next group in the list, which is the Poposia Conservation District. They have one Account 1 project this year for a total requested grant of $35,000. And I believe Bobby Thoman was supposed to be on the line from the district if you have any questions.
Bobby, can you introduce yourself?
Maybe.
I thought I heard something, but.
And I believe Bobby Tillman was supposed to be on the line from the district if you have any questions.
Oh. Receiving the feedback again. Probably need to.
Bobby, could you please mute?
Can you hear
your
me?
computer? Yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Bobby. Can you introduce yourself real quick?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Do we have any questions for Bobby? Or Jody? Chairman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chair. I just, thanks, Bobby, for being here, but I was just curious, when the contract, or when we're given the 35,000, which is the max under the small water projects, and it's 180,000, are they getting grant funding for theirs, or how are they getting the rest of the money on most of these projects where they're in excess of, half?
And of course, we could ask the district specifically for this specific project, but a lot of the districts will partner with NRCS funds. They will get EQIP funding. Depending upon the type of project, they may get Trout Unlimited funding. They may get, as we have seen earlier today, Game and Fish is working with the guys in Matitsi. So it sort of depends on what the project type is and the needs of the area are. It is very common to bundle our funding with other funding because we basically provide cash at the end of the project, which is desirable for a lot of people, whereas Trout Unlimited and Ducks Unlimited and guys like that can come in with engineers and do the design. So it's a really big effort on the part of the sponsors for projects like this to, work behind the scenes to bundle other funding sources, Natural Resources Trust, Game and Fish, whatever they can do to get these other funding sources put together.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much for attending. We appreciate it.
Thank you. So that takes us to the next group in the list, provided I'm not getting myself out of order here, is Sheridan County Conservation District. They have 5 Account 1 projects this year for a total requested grant of $169,000. And I believe that Jackie Turner from Sheridan Conservation District was going to be online virtually if you have any questions.
Jackie, do you want to introduce yourself? Ms. Turner?
Hello, sorry. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay, so Carrie and I with the district are here, and we also have Andrew with the NRCS. Happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, just overview on that environmental project. They're kind of interesting. Just like to hear about it.
Did you hear the question?
Yeah, Sorry, can you repeat the question?
We're having technical difficulties on the.
What's the makeup of the environmental project?
So that's a kind of a multi-site project on an ephemeral seasonal stream in the area north of Ranchester, to reduce erosion and channelizing forces in the stream channel, and also to kind of stockpile water in the floodplain, widen that floodplain green zone using Z-dike rock structures and the Zuni bowl plunge erosion control kind of structures.
Thank you.
Of course.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for attending. We appreciate it.
So that takes us to the next group in the list. The next group in the list for account one is the Shoshone Conservation District. They have one requested project this year for a total requested grant of $35,000. And I believe Elise Rose was attending virtually if you have any questions.
Elise, you want to introduce yourself? Ms. Rose, are you out there?
Looks like the microphone's muted.
Your microphone might be muted. Well, is there any questions for Jody or Miss Rose if she can get on? Any questions? Well, thanks for attending. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay, good. I had some technical issues there, but yeah, if you had any questions, I am available. Thanks.
Well, we appreciate you coming in. I don't think we have any questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that takes us to the next group in the list. That is the South Bighorn Conservation District. They have two account one projects this year for a total requested grant amount of $49,000. And I believe Ashley Conan was going to be attending virtually.
Ms. Conan, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions for Ashley? Any questions? Well, we appreciate you attending. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, that takes us to the next group in the list, which is the Sublette County Conservation District. They have one requested account one project this year for a total requested grant amount of $12,000. And Mike Hinn is here if you have any questions.
Welcome, Mike.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I'd entertain any questions on this small reservoir development that we're working with the landowner on, and would like to echo what other district staff has said. This program really helps our landowners put conservation practices on the ground, and we greatly appreciate the commission's efforts with the Water Development Office on these projects, and working side by side with Jody over the last, not quite as long as Don, but 9 years has been a great pleasure.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions?
Just a comment, I'd like to thank Mike from driving down from Pinedale. And just explain the public benefit on this small reservoir.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Cott, it was a wonderful drive down. It's summer in Cheyenne compared to Pinedale, so anytime to come where you don't have to scrape the windshield in the morning is great. But no, this small reservoir, for those that might be familiar with Sublette County, is kind of between Black Butte and Middle Butte on your way up the Cora Highway to Kendall Valley. And there's an existing spring that was developed in the early 2000s on this property, and it's since changed hands, and the new landowner wanted to develop a small reservoir for both domestic livestock use, but it is close proximity to a game and fish elk feed ground, as well as moose and mule deer and sage grouse frequent the area. So having this small reservoir will probably benefit those wildlife tremendously as they migrate from the upper green down to their winter ranges, as well as we've seen in another reservoir on an adjacent property that this commission has funded. We've seen waterfowl actually start utilizing it in the spring through fall period between the ice on and off periods. So it'll be a large benefit to that as well. This time the landowner doesn't have any thoughts of putting any fish into that pond due to the size and the high winter kill potential, but all the other wildlife species will tremendously benefit from it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Thanks for attending.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner.
Appreciate the drive down.
And that
Jody?
takes us to the next group on the list. Teton County Conservation District has one account one project this year for a total requested grant amount of $35,000. And I believe Rob Segroy was attending virtually today. If you have any questions.
Rob, can you introduce yourself if you're online?
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners, staff. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be a small water project program applicant. This is Rob Scroy, Land Resources Specialist, Teton Conservation District.
Thank you and welcome, Rob. Questions for Rob? Commissioner Cott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rob is, and I apologize for not reading my book more closely. It's a thick book. Is this development of a pond for fire suppression, water supply? Just a little bit about that.
Yes, thank you. This is an underground cistern. It is a buried structure that'll provide year-round access, reliable water source for fire suppression. Being underground, it won't be subject to being, of course, freezing like a surface pond would be, and supports a remote area that wasn't required to put in water sources at the time of development prior to regulation that we see now for new subdivision that does have requirements for those things to be put in at the time of development.
Thank you.
Chairman.
Commissioner Glick.
I have a question. How many gallons does this cistern, what's the size of the cistern?
The size is, I'm double checking here, a pair of 5,000 gallon tanks. So 10,000 total.
That doesn't seem like very much. Seem like it'd be larger, but that's just a comment. Thanks.
Any other questions, commissioners? Well, Rob, thanks for attending. We appreciate it.
Thank you for this opportunity. It's appreciated. It's a tremendous program that's provided a lot of benefit to natural resources and the public here.
Thank you.
That takes us to the next group on the list, which is the Washakie County Conservation District. They have one account one project this year for a total requested grant of $10,000. And I believe Amanda O'Keefe is attending virtually if you have any questions.
Amanda, can you introduce yourself if you're online? Amanda, are you out there?
Still on mute.
We think you're still on mute. Well, commissioners, any questions for Amanda online? Or Jody? Well, thank you for attending.
Yes, thank you. Sorry about that. A little technical difficulty.
Not a problem. It's that day.
Yeah. We appreciate the opportunity for hearing our project and for the staff as well for assisting us. We have not done a project like this since I've been here in 2020, so we're excited to participate.
Well, we appreciate you, Amanda, especially coming online and being available for questions.
Thank you.
Jody?
Okay, that takes us to the next and final project for account 1 this year is the Weston County Natural Resource District. They have one account 1 project this year for a total requested grant of $15,000. And I believe Caleb Carter was planning on attending virtually if you have any questions.
Caleb, are you online? Would you like to introduce yourself?
It's like you might be muted.
You might be muted, Caleb.
Yep, I'm here.
Thank you for attending. Commissioner, do we have
Yeah,
any
thanks for having me.
questions for Mr. Carter? Commissioner Glick? No. Okay. Well, thanks for attending. We appreciate it. We had some questions. Fire them off. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate the opportunity to apply.
Commissioner Glick?
I just wanted to thank everybody that attended online and everybody that attended in person. It's greatly appreciated by the commissioners. Thank you.
I agree with that 100%. I also would like to thank Jody for her really small font because my eyes needed to work out, and without having that, I
Happy to help.
Director.
With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd ask for your consideration of all the account 1 small water recommendations. You can see that we have enough funding to fund the recommendations we have in front of you. So if you so choose, then that would be also contingent upon the omnibus water bill construction becoming law.
Mr. Chair,
Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion.
Thank you.
I would move approval of the 2024 small water programs account 1 projects contingent on the omnibus water bill becoming law.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Commissioner Choma? Any discussion? Discussion? With that, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Motion carries. Thank you. Commissioner Glick.
Jody, this is a question for you. You know where they did that cistern, the fire suppression system for 10,000 gallons? You know, if they have those electric, you know, and this is just emergency thing, and I work with emergency preparedness. And with those electric vehicles, it takes 10,000 gallons of water to put one out. So we may have to look at larger cisterns across the state, especially if that's going to be utilized later on. Because the normal car would take 3,000 gallons. It's those Lion batteries. They could put them out and then they'll sit there for a while, and pretty soon it starts up again. And the 10,000 gallons is poured on there to keep the heat down too. So it's something to think about if we need something larger is what I'm thinking. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I can say we get more of these from Teton counties than pretty much anywhere, and their county fire people are highly involved, and they usually provide letters of support for each one of these. So I'm presuming that they have these size based on their county regulations, but that very rapidly gets out of my area of expertise. But that is a good thing to bring up. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Glick. I do believe Wyoming's policy is let her burn. Oh, I probably shouldn't have said that out loud, but thank you.
Okay, if we are ready, that takes us to account 2. So beginning at the top of account 2, We have Clear Creek Conservation District. They have one account two project this year for requested total project grant of $10,500. And I have to get back to the top of my list, otherwise my brain evaporates here. That is Zach Byram, and I believe he was attending virtually today.
Yes, good morning. I'm online, Mr. Chairman, Commission members. Thank you for having me. I can answer any questions if you have some.
Commissioner, do we have any questions for Zach or Jody? Well, thank you for attending, Zach. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me, and I would like to piggyback on all of the positive feedback that Chairman and Commission have received regarding this program. Conservation districts are always appreciative of the assistance and the help that we get from the staff, and the program itself is very beneficial for Wyoming constituents, so we do appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Jody?
Okay, so that takes us to the next group in account two is the Hot Springs Conservation District. They have one account two project this year for a total requested grant of $7,500. And I believe Kathy is attending virtually if you have any questions.
Thank you for all of the help that you've given Hot Springs County. We are grateful for all the help through the commission.
Kathy, thank you for those kind words. Commission, do you have any questions for Kathy, for Jody? No questions? Well, thanks again, Kathy, for attending. We do appreciate it.
Okay, that takes us to the next group on the list, which is the Laramie County Conservation District. They have two account two projects this year for a requested total grant of $44,000, and they are here if you have any question.
Thanks for attending again. Or hanging out with us at least. Any questions?
Chairman,
Commissioner Glick?
On the Prairie Pasture Solar Project, can you tell us a little bit about what that is?
It's a excuse me, it's a conversion from a windmill to a solar source, just a lot more consistent for this producer. It'll actually allow them to keep the pasture for grazing just north of Cheyenne.
Okay.
So it's beneficial. We have a lot of housing developments going around town, and this will help them keep that in more of a rangeland condition versus something else.
Subdivisions.
Well, I mean, obviously people need to live somewhere, but there's always going to be encroachment. But this is a area where there are wildlife herds, antelope. But this will help this guy out, producing more consistent water. Weird enough, this year hasn't been that windy. I know. Sorry. I just ended it. You can all crucify me later.
Oh, man. All right. Well, thank you, except for the wind comment.
Yeah, I should know better.
Commissioners, any other questions? Thanks again for attending. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks to Jody.
Okay, that takes us to the next group on the list for account two. That's the Little Snake River Conservation District. They have 6 account two projects this year for a total requested grant amount of $145,500. And Dawn is here if you have any questions.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner.
I have a question. Dawn, could you just give us an overview of the Bitter Creek drop structure? I know that this was a project that received Water Development Commission money in the past. And just where are we with this project right now?
So it was finished, constructed, and this is with Sweetwater County Conservation District. So we recently did a land acquisition with them. So we took some of Sweetwater County in our district. So we're closer to that project now. This project actually eroded underneath of it. So it's getting ready to fail. We sent our engineer out there to camera the project. So he drilled into the existing cement and cameraed it, and it's eroding underneath it. So it needs this, and actually the small water helps, but it's a drop in the bucket. We have several other entities that we're going after for money to rehab this project.
So does it look like you'll have some success with those other entities that you're going after the money?
Yes. Yep. And Sweetwater County mostly is taking care of that conservation district is. We're just helping with the engineering side and possibly, so engineering, construction, and then follow through with all of it, but they're helping with the funding. So it was a struggle the first time, so we've stepped in and said we'd help.
You know, living in Sweetwater County, I am very familiar with this project, and just a point of information, Bitter Creek is the largest ephemeral drainage in area in the United States. It stretches it from Green River, Wyoming, you know, almost to nearly Rollins. I mean, into the Colorado line up to the sand dunes. It's a absolutely massive drainage, and this head cut is about 20 feet high. And if it fails, it could endanger the railroad and the interstate. It's a very important project.
Thank you.
Thank you for those thoughts and ideas, Mr. Commissioner. We appreciate you educating us.
Mhm. Thank you.
Any other questions for Donna? Questions? Well, Donna, thanks again for attending.
Thank you.
And so that takes us to the next group on the list for account 2 is the Meeteetse Conservation District. They have 4 account 2 projects this year for a total recommended grant request of $140,000. And I believe they were attending digitally if you had any questions.
Is Meeteetse online by chance? I thought they might have been. Oh, they are?
I am now. Thank you for having me.
Wow, thanks for dialing in. We appreciate it. Any questions for Meeteetse? Questions? Well, thank you again for attending. We appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
That takes us to the next group on the list for account 2 is the Saratoga Encampment Rollins Conservation District. They have 1 account 2 grant request this year for a total requested grant of $35,000, and they are here if you have any questions.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, my name is Justin Stern. I'm representing Saratoga Encampment Rollins Conservation District. I appreciate your time today.
Justin, I appreciate you coming in. Questions for Justin or Jody? Questions, commissioners? Well, thanks again for attending. We do appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And so that takes us to the next group on the list for account 2 is the Teton Conservation District. They have 2 account 2 projects for a total requested grant of $70,000. And I believe Rob is online if you have any questions for him.
Rob, are you still online?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, staff. Thank you, Ms. Pavlicka. Happy to answer any questions about these diversion projects. Thank you for the opportunity to apply.
Commissioners, questions for Rob? None? Well, again, thanks, Rob, for attending. We do appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Okay, so that takes us to the last group for account 2 today, and that is the Wheatland Irrigation District. This is their first time applying, and they have 1 project request for $27,500. And I actually didn't get a response back from Wheatland, so I don't know if they managed to make it down today, or I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Is there anybody from Wheatland either online or in the audience?
Chairman.
Commissioner Glick?
Jody, when you say canal lining, what kind of lining is that?
I couldn't tell you because I don't know if the project has advanced to the level that I haven't seen designs yet. Typically for our program, that's ditch to pipe, but in this case, it may be a canal liner. And since I haven't reviewed any plans yet, I don't have that information on the top of my head.
Okay, I was just
Chairman.
wondering because I didn't know what the material you was using to line the canal, that's all. But maybe later you can explain that to me. Thank
Sure.
you.
In cases in the past, we have done a geomembrane where they will, bury the geomembrane in at the top end of the canal and then, lay the geomembrane and carefully make sure that that's settled the way it should be. I wish I had more information off the top of my head. That
The summary says a vinyl liner.
a vinyl liner. Okay, thank you. Too many for me to remember them, apparently.
Commissioner Hogan,
Chairman.
did you have any other? No, okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner?
Jody, with this lining, is it gonna do the same thing center pivots do and cause water to not flow anymore forever on, where it's naturally flowing right now?
So typically when you line a canal, nobody is going to ask for money to help line a canal if the water that is filling up the ditch banks is not a problem. So typically by the time they come to us and ask for help, it's because the guy who has the field or the pasture down gradient of the canal, it's salting out or they can't get the tractors in to hay it. So typically by the time they are willing to put the expense and effort into lining, there is enough water being lost from the canal that it's a problem. So the water will move through that section of the canal rather than seeping out of the canal. So does that answer your question?
Follow up.
Commissioner Pence?
Where these guys have center pivots that are robbing our earth of water, a lot of their canals are not lined and they got extensive canal systems and water is still running. So, I know it's your belief that center pivots are taking away from the fall flow, but you're welcome to come out and I'll show you. It hasn't harmed a thing.
I deeply love this discussion and I'd be happy to come take a look anytime.
Thanks, Jody.
Well, please invite the rest of us so we can watch. Thank you. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner?
this has more to do with how I try to keep track of things. I looked down the project priorities and how you've rated each of these, and I'm looking in our operating criteria. And I don't know, maybe I'm missing a page in this operating criteria. I look at account 1 and account 2, and I'm not always matching up. Can you explain, is there something not in the book or am I missing something?
So that is a really good question. And you are not missing anything. It is not, if you look at the priorities, it is not as intuitive as you might like it to be. So when I put the project priorities together, I had to base it off of agency mission. So as an agency, what is it our mission to do and what is it that we have historically done as an agency, which is how I ended up with the list of priorities. So this is the guidance document. It's available for download on our website. It lists the account priorities. It sort of runs through the criteria. And then with each one of those priorities, it talks about the sort of basic project types that would fall under those categories. So as an agency, we have historically prioritized source water development. So that got to be a number 1 priority. Source water development typically means wells or development of a spring. Storage, small reservoirs or wetlands, if a wetland has an outlet structure that allows you to control it. Pipelines, conveyance, solar platforms, and windmills. That's sort of the catch-all of the basics that make most of these projects work. Irrigation infrastructure, we just say irrigation infrastructure may be eligible as the project definition. So that's one of those ones that we kind of have to take a very close look at to make sure that it meets the public benefit requirements, which is why there's not a lot of specifics with that one. Environmental projects, number 5, these are specifically referencing stream bank stabilization projects and erosion reduction projects. And then recreational, we haven't had too many of those, but those can be fish or habitat projects that are not associated with irrigation systems. So those categories for the priorities are sort of based on the intent of the project. And then the project types come in and we fit them into one of those categories based on the intent of the project. As an example, I like to tell people, if we have a well with the pipeline, well, there's two potential priorities there that could fall into. So what I will do is I will look at the total estimated project cost. And if it's a 200-foot well with 10,000 feet of pipe, the pipe's going to drive the cost. So that makes it a pipeline project. If it's a deep well with just a trough at the wellhead, well, then that makes it a, cost of the well. It's going to drive the cost. It makes it a well project. So we try to look at the overall purpose of the project and what drives the cost of the project before we decide which one of these priorities to put it into. Does that help?
I guess it might confuse me even more because what I'm hearing you say is maybe what I have in this operating criteria is not exactly what you have.
Oh, this guidance document is based on the criteria, and it was adopted in 2021 by the Commission and the Select Water, and it was sort of like the day-to-day operations and a sort of more detailed explanation about how the program works and how we implement the criteria on a day-to-day basis. So this is available, and we might even have some hard copies. I think we ran out of hard copies, but they're going to be making some more. The small water criteria is 4 pages. It's not very long. It is also available on our website.
I think what I'm hearing you say is that the project type is actually driving the priority more so than the benefits that are showing here on these priority lists. So I don't have that document.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Craig, you're looking at our overall program criteria. There's actually a separate small water program criteria, which has that list of priorities. And then on top of that is this guidance document. They're all kind of in the same area on the web page, but just so you're clear, because I keep seeing you look at the green booklet and that's not the criteria. So at least for small water.
I'm easily confused.
Hey, me too. I would say, as we've talked about a couple times now, August, we're going to have a pretty in-depth conversation, I think, about small water. And if there's concerns you have or, misunderstanding of where information is, we need to consolidate things, we'll have all those conversations, I think, and any changes we might need to make to the criteria or guidance documents or combining, we can sure have then. But in the meantime, be happy to bring you up to speed more too and talking with Jody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay. I guess with that, we need a motion to approve for the small water program summary for account 2.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the account 2 projects. The fund contingent upon the passing of the omnibus bill by the state legislature. Thank you.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Any other discussions on the small water program? With that, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Motion carries. Thanks, Jody. Thanks again for all the education. Every time you come up, we get educated.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, we are on agenda items. I'm going to say 12, 13, and 14. So refer back to your peach colored summary sheet, and now we are on the back side of it. So these are all the 2024 construction project agreements that have come out of the omnibus construction bill. Again, we've talked about them. We just need your approval on the actual agreements. So we'll run down through those real quick. That first block are the 2 projects under our account 1, new development. Excuse me, just a minute. New development level 3 projects. One point out real quick, the Bighorn Regional Joint Powers Board, that's the one that we originally had pre-construction dollars out of our funds, construction dollars out of general funds. Now those will all be out of account one funding. The second group of projects, we've got 11 projects under account two construction. Ranchester would be a similar project. That's the second to last one. Originally, we had the general fund for construction. Now with that refund to account one, it's all coming out of account one. And then the third block of project are all the amendments that we've discussed in the past. I think we have 11 time extension amendments. And we also have, about halfway down through there, we've got the Goshen Irrigation District Tunnel Rehab, which more or less puts that supplemental water bill funding from 2022 into an agreement. And we're actually amending the previous pre-construction agreement with GID. And that's in the form of that 100% grant, the $21,810,000. Happy Valley is an amendment. This is where, again, they came back for construction dollars. They were looking, or Select Water Committee suggested general fund. Now that's going to be coming out of account one as well. So we're amending in that additional $2,837,450. Levitt Reservoir, I'm just kind of going through the ones that aren't just time extensions. That's where we're adding in the $10,850,000 so they can complete that fourth bid package that we talked about back in August for the transfer pipeline that would take water up into the Shell Canal. And then the last one I might mention would be the Sheridan Northeast Transmission Main Extension. And that's an amendment to bring in the construction dollars in the amount of $1.755 million. So I would ask if there are any questions. You probably don't want me to keep rambling on about these things. So I'd happy to answer any questions on the 24 construction project agreements.
Any questions for the director on any of the projects? No? So, Jason, since we have them listed as individual items on it, I think we'll probably do those as individual votes.
Yep, and these would be contingent upon the omnibus water bill construction becoming law.
Of course. Okay, so for the first one, for the 2024 construction project agreements, level 3 projects account one, do we have any motion and a second?
Chairman, I propose that we approve the Bighorn Regional Joint Powers Board Lucerne Tank and Pump Station. And can we do these in a block, Jason?
Yes.
Also Skyline well connection. So I make a motion to approve. Contingent upon the omnibus bill becoming law.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? With that, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries.
I might suggest taking a look at the agenda, and for like this next one, item 13, you could, in your motion, if you so choose, just say 2024 construction project agreements for account 2, rather than needing them to name off each individual.
Great.
Mr. Chairman, I have a motion.
Chairman?
Hey, Mr. Chairman, I would motion to approve the construction project agreements, level 3 projects out of account 2, the construction projects, subject or contingent upon passage of the omnibus water bill.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second that. And I have a question as well. Looking at the La Prairie Dam, are we at the point to, I guess I'd like to ask where we're at with that project.
Mr. Chairman, I might have Chase Tavelli come up and give you a quick update. He's a project manager along with Jeff Kaiser in our construction department. He'd probably do a better job than I would.
Chase, come on down.
Mr. Chair, Chase Tavelli, project manager on this, and I note that Jeff Kaiser has been helping out. He's kind of going to be part of the transition when this goes to construction, and he conveniently missed today's meeting. Yeah, Douglas. The Laprelle Dam, right now, we are dealing mostly with federal funding. And yesterday, we received a notice of award. Well, earlier, we received a $5 million award as part of the infrastructure bill that was kind of designed for a dam like this in the United States, and Laprelle qualified for it. We went through the process of making sure it was qualified and received $5 million of 100 million that was in the infrastructure bill. We've been spending that money, and yesterday we received notice of award for another 8 million, which is amended to the 5 million. Okay. So that leaves, 100 minus 13.2 million. We have also submitted and that's for pre-construction. Okay. We've submitted an application for the remaining funding, the remaining of the 100 funding for construction. Right now we're kind of going back and forth on that. The Bureau of Reclamation will do a look at the 30% design and constructability and cost estimates that our consultants put together to make sure that the funding is being spent appropriately according to the Bureau of Reclamation. And so we're going back and forth right now to make sure that they have the appropriate information that they need. That's moving a little bit slower, but we're getting there. As far as the dam, we just received a 30% design and cost estimate and constructability. That was very recent. We've reviewed it. We had a meeting where we sat down and they went through some of their assumptions and how they put things together. And we're kind of wrapping up what was part of Amendment 6, which is this $5 million. Amendment 6 you approved about a year ago. So we're kind of wrapping up that work, and then we've got a project agreement there, and Jeff will be working with the sponsor on that project agreement, and we'll see where things go from here with our work in construction.
Mr. Chairman, I might just add too that we've been under a planning contract this whole time because it dates back to when we started doing a watershed study, if I remember right, and then rockfall analysis and how that turned into finding these problems with the dam itself. But so we're spending fully federal dollars at this point, and you can correct me when I say something errant, but and then the other thing I would mention is currently I think the schedule would be to potentially be under construction on some of the say access roads and things like that in 2025, and then start construction into the dam in 2026, just for a general time frame. Give you an idea.
Thank you. That answers my questions.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure, did you vote on that or was that a
No.
question?
No.
Okay.
So we do have a second and a motion. Or a motion and a second. Yeah. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, motion carries. Okay, so next block. Do we have a second or a motion? Commissioner, yeah, I want that second.
Mr. Chairman, make a motion that we approve the construction project amendments for account 1, 2, and 3 upon approval of the omnibus bill becoming law.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Any discussion on any of these projects? With that, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're getting near the end here. So a couple of closeout memos under agenda item 15, Deputy Director of Construction, Bill Brewer.
Morning, Commissioner.
Morning, Bill.
Commission, Bill Brewer, Deputy Director of Construction. Got 2 projects to close out. As the last few months, construction projects have been starting to pick up again. We had quite a lull after COVID of getting things moving again and with bids and everything, but we've been moving along pretty quickly now. I'm getting some projects bid and awarded and got a couple closeouts. This one actually, the first one, Cody Canal project, actually, the portion that was completed quite a while ago. After about the time the Buchanan lateral was being constructed, the district changed their local manager. And upon further review, he decided that the Frost lateral wasn't as bad a shape as they were thinking. And they questioned whether or not they wanted to move forward with the project. At that time, I was the project manager on this and discussed with them and said, let's evaluate it a couple of years. We're not in any rush to turn this back. Since then, Jeff Kaiser has taken over as the project manager. But as they've reevaluated, they just didn't feel that this lateral really deserved being rebuilt at this time. And it's always a concern when we split a project like this and revert money, whether we've spent money on that project we're returning back versus the project we actually funded. So I went back and reviewed the original project recommendation and cost estimates. The Buchanan lateral was actually the cheaper of the 2 laterals. And we actually still came in under budget on it. So the reversion you are seeing down below is the complete Frost lateral reversion plus a portion of what was originally set aside for the Buchanan lateral. So one other thing I'd like to point out on this one is if you look down at the construction, you see we received 4 bids that ranged from 65,000 to 75,000. And if you look down at the contractor amount, it looks like we awarded to the highest contractor at 75. Actually, Ferguson was the lowest and supplied those materials right at that 65,000. However, that 75 also includes locally sourced concrete, rebar, some pipe bedding, et cetera, that were not competitively bid because they were sourced from a local source. But overall, this was a good little project, got it completed and was actually under budget, which is nice.
Can we get a page number for anybody that might not be caught up on the e-notebook in case 917? Okay, thanks.
So hopefully I didn't go through that too quickly. If anybody has any questions on this Cody Canal 2019 project.
Chairman. Morning. I have a question about the Cody canals. Can you explain which canal that is? I know there's that one that's out in the irrigation district, then there's one that's closer to town.
Right. So this is actually kind of the Cody Canal Irrigation District.
Okay.
So from that main canal, they have multiple laterals coming off.
Yep.
This project focused originally on the Buchanan lateral and the Frost lateral. The Buchanan lateral was converted from open ditch to a pipe, and the Frost lateral was not completed at this time, and they've decided to revert the money that was associated with that project.
Is that Buchanan? Is that the one that goes through town?
I honestly don't know. It's been.
Is that the one, Chase? Chase Tavelli, I think I worked with him on that. Is that the same one? I can't remember the name of that canal. Anyway, it's just a question. Sorry.
And I did review these plans, but it has been about 5 years since
It's been about 5 years since I've been there too. I was just wanting to know. All right. Thanks. Bye.
Okay, thank you. So the next project is the Eden Valley Irrigation District Farson Lateral 2020. The irrigation or the Eden Valley project has been going on for quite a few years. They cycle through multiple funding agencies, lining these canals. This is the main, one of their two main canals, that they have. And they're in a unique position where they qualify for multiple different funding agencies. So they tend to go with a pair, get their funding, get a project finished, come into a different pair for the next one. So we've been working with them for quite a while, getting quite a bit of their system into pipe. This one was, like I say, came in 2020. The engineer was quickly hired. So by May 1st, the engineer was under budget or under contract. Because this is kind of a extension of the same ditch that's just been in phases, the engineering fees came in actually very reasonable, because they were basically using their existing plans and just tweaking them for the new section. So they came in about half the budget we had actually set aside. So I appreciate that from the engineer being bid on that. The overall construction came in slightly over the engineer's estimate. However, because in 2020 we were a little gun shy with the current inflation, we had put in a 15% contingency rather than our standard 10% contingency. And in the end, we did not need all of that extra contingency that we set aside. So we are wrapping up this project. It was an overall $3.8 million project, and we will be reverting about $480,000 at the completion of this phase. They do have another phase in work at this time, and they will probably be showing up again this fall, I would imagine. For they're getting pretty close to finishing this up, but we've been doing phases on this, I think, since 2017. Okay. Any questions related to the Eden Valley project?
Any questions for Bill? No? I don't think we have to have a motion on this, since it's just a closeout. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I don't believe we have any other items requiring commission action under agenda item 16, unless you know of any. Okay, we'll move into the discussion. We just have one project we want to, I guess, provide an update on, and that's the Cheyenne Crystal Bypass Pipeline from 2022. And I'm going to hand it over to Bill here to talk about that too.
Okay. This was a project brought forward and approved 2 years ago at this meeting. This was part of a study related to the Crystal Reservoir and somewhat of their dam and outlet works, that there was concern if that dam or outlet works needed to be reworked, that a large portion of the water, I think all of the surface water used by Cheyenne flows through the outlet works, and how we would get the water around if those if the reservoir needed to be drained. The project was initiated with an estimated budget around $3.8 million to bypass. Upon award of the contract to the engineer was concerned with the current costs, and it was a bit reevaluated. The costs looked like they were going to be considerably higher. The city went ahead and had a separate study done on their own dollar to look at some alternatives to doing this. Came up with an idea for an alternative. However, the cost still looked awfully high. And at this point, the city has decided that the cost of putting in a kind of a permanent bypass for that outlet works and dam just doesn't, the benefit isn't there for this in total cost. They believe they could put in a temporary bypass if there was an issue, or if they needed to work on the dam, schedule the dam rehab for off season so that they wouldn't need all the irrigation water, et cetera, and do it in phases. So They believe at this point in time that this project cost has outweighed its benefits and would like to revert the project and not move forward with it.
Mr. Chairman, I'd add one thing. So this is a project that was funded with ARPA funds in 2022. And then we also had match funds associated with it. So our intent, and we've talked to the governor's office as well as the budget department, because this kind of came up in conversations about ARPA during the legislative session and the dollars that we have matched against ARPA projects. And so they're aware of that. And the ARPA money would most likely then get swept back on that April 1st deadline and can be redistributed to other projects that could potentially spend it. Also would free up the funding that we had matched associated with this. The other thing I would mention is that Bill mentioned some design work had been done, but that design work had been done with the engineer they already had on board when they did their study, I believe, and they've paid for that themselves. So none of the funding either from account one, or I guess, I don't know if that was count 1 or 2, I can't remember. Count 1 or ARPA has been spent. So it would be fully 100% refunded and we wouldn't have to worry about funds that had been spent. And, we had a situation where Sheridan was going to revert some funds. And if they'd spent any, then we'd have to look at what the interest would have been on those funds if they had been in our account over a time frame, But in this case, nothing's been spent. So it'll basically, sorry, I'm kind of butchering this explanation, but our intent is to close the project out and those funds would revert either to our accounts or to the ARPA funds. So any questions?
Well, does anybody else have a question before I jump on my soapbox?
Chairman. Question,
Commissioner?
when that ARPA funds isn't utilized and it was previously designated to a certain project, when it comes back to the state account or however that plays out, is that putting it up for jeopardy for the federal government to reassume that funds, or how does that work?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Glick, I believe if the state of Wyoming didn't spend the funds and reverted those, I'm not sure exactly what that would look like. I suppose it would be the December 2024 deadline to have them obligated. If Wyoming didn't have them obligated, I suppose they'd go back to the federal government and maybe the federal government would send them to California, for example, if they can use them. I'm not sure about that. This particular project and 3 others in 2022 were funded. When we got to the appropriations committee during the legislative session, they said, hey, it was new at that point in time. So we knew that drinking water type projects would be eligible for these ARPA funds as well. So they chose to put the ARPA funds towards those projects, but our project or our program funds were also kind of backup dollars to those ARPA funds. So there still is appropriated water development program funds. So by closing out the project, it'd free up both our project funds as well as water development funds. And we do have a representative of the sponsor here today. If you have questions, I know some of the changes that they've made to their system over time with wells and being able to bring other reservoirs into their system has helped and has kind of changed the situation and needing this bypass to get through a time where they'd have to shut down Crystal Reservoir. So if you have specific questions, we can bring up Frank Strong. He's out in the crowd today.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question. Was a little bit fuzzy on the explanation if the funds revert, the ARPA funds versus the state funds, and whether there would or would not be interest charged on that. If I'm referring back to our little book here, if I recall correctly, there is a requirement if funds are not expended. I believe it might say something to the effect that if some construction has been done. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, in this particular case, no funding either from ARPA or from water development has been spent. So it's been sitting in our account that whole time, drawing interest for the program.
I see.
If they would have diverted or used some of that funding for design, then and David might have to help me out here, but I think we would look at, okay, when was that money spent? When did it come out of our account? And then let's say they, and I'm not talking about Cheyenne, but just a theoretical project at this point, they abandon the project for a reason that the commission doesn't think is acceptable. You could ask them to pay back that funding with interest, and it would more or less be, I think, interest from the time that it was withdrawn from our account to pay for the expense of, say, design to, and the interest that would have been gained on that same dollar amount if it had stayed in the account for a particular amount of time. Again, I'm not explaining that very well, but David, do you have anything to add?
That makes more sense. The fact that the money didn't leave our account, we were still earning the interest. That
That's right.
itself answers my question.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions, commissioners? Commissioner Glick, do you have a question?
Yes, I do, I guess. I was just wanted to, in my mind, I was just worried about the federal government reassuming the funds, that's all. Because we could utilize them here. I know there's a lot of places that do need funding, and I'm not too sure if it's, I guess most of my concern out here in Wyoming is a lot of people, their municipal water systems are failing. And that, that funding, I would rather have it stay here or something like that than go back and then be sent to California. So that's all I was worried about. Thanks.
Is Frank Strong in the audience? Oh, I didn't see you over there, Frank. How's it going?
Good. How are you doing, sir?
Good. Anybody else have any questions for Frank? Well, Frank, I just got a couple of questions. I didn't like the way this project turned out. As you probably know, with me being in water quality for all those years and at the board, that I thought it was really important to get that bypass, not necessarily for the occasion that you might have to temporarily bypass it for dam construction, but I was more concerned with the water quality, being that that several years back we had to add oxygen to the lake to keep the manganese in the sediment, and now we've had 5-6 years of that manganese and iron buildup in that sediment, and at some point it's not going to hold that manganese and that iron anymore, and things are going to come out, and then it's going to be a major cost to try to get that sediment or put a bypass in at that time, and it's not something that you can do schedule around a few weeks. And Cheyenne's water is going to turn to iced tea for months. So I don't know if anybody's addressed that or looked at that, if that's a possibility down the road, but I know we've got 5-6 years of that oxygenated water, and we haven't had those black brown water calls for years in Cheyenne, and I was hoping that this was going to put my mind to ease, that kind of almost ensures that we wouldn't have that in the future. Or if we did, we could bypass Crystal Lake for that summer till we could figure out how to get the sediment out. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, sir, through you. This has been a very interesting project for the board, and it was kind of summarized. It kept having additional challenges, funding sources, there were additional money that's being needed. So as we were evaluating the potential of an underwater pipeline to connect to one of the outlet pipes, the cost kept going over the budget, and we knew that everybody had limited funds. So we started asking, what scenarios are we planning for here? What can we do? We evaluated other alternatives, including, can we get new North Crow water or South Crow water to Sherrard to be able to treat in an event of this? What could we do to create a bypass if we needed to in the event of emergency? And, one of the things we explored was a temporary pipeline just going across the ground where we could tie into the what we call the Crystal Spur. That's where stage 2 water enters the Crystal Reservoir. What would it take to just put a temporary pipeline in to take it to the Hecla so we could continue to deliver water? And it was like tenth of the cost of what we thought it was going to take to build the permanent pipeline. We looked at, in the event of, let's say we had a manganese hit, you know, what would we do? And probably we'd have to, if it was middle of summer, we would have to put in some water restrictions. We do have our wells that can do 10 million gallons a day. We have the ability to chlorinate that water. We might be able to bring water from New North Crow, from South Crow. But when we looked at, I don't want to say money is everything, but when we look at the economics, we'd have to run on this bypass pipeline for an extended period just to recoup, or so to speak, sell the water just to pay for the pipeline initially. It just didn't make sense. We'd be better off doing some short-term water restrictions, living off the wells and a temporary pipeline than we would spending, you know, the cost was up to 5.5 million to build it per the original scope. And we just couldn't justify that impact to our customers. We didn't know where we were going to secure the additional funding, and we just didn't feel it was the best use of that money. We felt like we could have better solutions that would be a lower cost to all parties involved.
So and this would have been an excellent project for that money that we got this year for redundancy, the 5 million that we had. This would have been, you know, almost perfect for those kind of projects. I'm just afraid that what's going to happen is it'll probably be a couple of years down the road, but at some point, Cheyenne's going to have a major event with that manganese and iron, and it won't be water restrictions because brown water is brown water, whether you use it or don't use it. But we don't want, you know, coming in and now it's an emergency and trying to hit that route when, you know, everybody's been aware of this issue since 2015, you know, water quality wise anyways. You know, not talking about the dam construction or pipeline construction.
Yeah.
We're just talking about good
An event
drinkable
that-
water.
A water quality event with Crystal Reservoir itself, whether it's manganese or an algae bloom or whatever that would make it where we can't use that water. Yes, the bypass pipeline absolutely would address it, but we think we have more options now with the hydro project. We install some valves that allow us to pull water from either Crystal or New North Crow, Old North Crow, at the same time or independently. We were able to install some improvements that allows all of our well water to go to Sherrard now, as opposed to going through Round Top and Sherrard. So I think we have enough opportunities now and solutions in our system that spending $5 million here isn't the best use of the funds. We're going to evaluate some projects to allow us to treat New North Crow water. We're evaluating how can we improve the water we get from South Crow and other solutions to get stage 2 or stage 1 water to our plant. We just think we can solve the solution with a reduced capital project.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Frank? Thanks, Frank.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, the last item, or second to last, summer meeting or summer tour. And you recall last meeting, we couldn't come to a conclusion on that. So we've thought about it here and we are looking at Evanston as our summer tour location. Haven't been in Division 4 very much. We kind of looked throughout the years of the water development summer tours, and that Division 4, the southwest corner of the state's been kind of lacking for tours. So I think we've got some different things we can look at. We don't have an itinerary set yet, but I don't want to give anything away just in case something falls through, but we've got some ideas and I think they'll be interesting. We just need to reach out and make some contacts and see if it's possible. So with your approval, we'll set that and we'll start making more plans, but we've got hotels reserved and meeting location reserved, and now just needing to reach out to folks to set up actual tour stops.
Does that sound good for everybody? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the last agenda item is just a reminder that our next meeting, and I should say the August meeting, I believe is 7th, 8th, and 9th currently. The tour would be on the 8th. 6, 7, 8. Okay. 6, 7, 8. I'm wrong. And then our next meeting is May 8th and 9th here in Cheyenne. And that's when we will be having the planning recommendations for what do we have, 9 projects, I think, that Barry went over. And we'll have looked at those in more detail. And a lot of you will probably have gone out on site and see those potentially in person when the project managers go out, and we'll have recommendations for you in May on those. So that's everything on the agenda that I had.
Okay. I guess we're finished up. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, guys.
Mr. Chairman, I think your excellent leadership deserves a round of applause.
Well, thanks for putting up